Greetings, everyone. English language teachers worldwide, ELTs around the world. It's time for another webinar brought to you by the American TESOL Institute. My name is Jason R. Levine, better known as Fluency MC. I have the pleasure and the privilege of hosting these webinars. Today, we've got another hot topic in this series, not a formal series exactly, but a series nonetheless. Top 10 tips for teaching nouns. We did top 10 tips for teaching verbs the last time. Next time, adjectives, adverbs. We'll see where it goes from there. You know, I love the alliteration, top 10 tips for teaching. These tips, by the way, when I say top 10, I'm certainly not implying that they are the best there are out there. These are my top tips for my experience teaching English and training English teachers. So without further ado, let's get started with a question of the most common 100 words in spoken American English. How many do you think are nouns? By spoken American English, I mean, well, I'm taking this from a corpus called the COCA. It's the corpus of contemporary American English, and it's based on spoken English, not just conversation, spoken in media, academic fields, etc. So this is just for fun. There are lots of corpora out there. This is a particularly good one, so I strongly recommend it. So what do you think? If you're here live, you can put your ideas in the comments. If you are watching asynchronously, just think about it, but you can also comment. The answer is fewer than you think, probably. Let's take a look. So here are the top 100 words, meaning the most frequent words in spoken English according to the COCA. And as you see, 5 of them, no more than 5, are nouns. Is it useful to know that the most common nouns in spoken American English are time, year, people, way, day? I think so. We're going to be talking about this a lot today in terms of how frequency can help us as teachers in our materials and understanding our course books and syllabi, whichever you prefer. I guess I say both. So yeah, time, year, people, way, day. And if you are as obsessed with frequency of language and corpora as I am, you might be curious what the next ones are. And if you're super, super obsessed, you might even know what they are. You might even have made a rhyme to remember them. Time, year, people, way, day, man, thing, woman, life, child, world, school, state, program. I know all of them, well, 100 of them in order, but that's because I'm crazy. Tip number 1, then, know the most high frequency nouns in English. Notice I'm not saying your students should know them or that you should teach them, but if you know them, there's so much you can do, how you could benefit from this understanding. Of course, it depends who your students are, where they are, what their needs are, what their aims are in terms of what high frequency means. So we could start with a corpus, but then, of course, I need to consider what nouns are. I mean, the 5 we just saw, I think we could argue almost anyone would need, but certainly it would depend on who your students are. And that's why it's great to start with a corpus that's sort of a general corpus, and then consider more specifically what your students would need. So here's the list of the top 100. And by the way, if you would like a PDF of this presentation, which would include this list, you can always email me, support@fluencymc.com. Again, that's support@fluencymc.com. And there is a song where I do a video where I do the top 100 nouns in English. You can check that out, Fluency MC on YouTube. Tip number 2. Don't focus on rules in general, but especially, I believe, don't focus on rules for using articles or singular plural. In my experience, the best thing is a lot of practice. Why? Well, think about people learning English as a first language. Do we learn this grammar consciously? Does somebody explain it to us? No. And when that happens, and we're going to see a few other times today with nouns when that happens, this is when you should be thinking, maybe it's better to get my students lots of exposure rather than have them study rules. Because in fact, the rules for articles, singular, plural too, but especially articles, are they rules really or patterns with exceptions? Can be super confusing. And singular, plural, students all over the world know the difference between singular and plural. Even if they don't have it in their language, they learn it and they're still making mistakes. So I don't think it's the studying of the rules that's going to help them using nouns with articles and singular, plural. This idea in tip number 2, we're going to return to quite often today. Tip number 3, teach determiners with high frequency countable nouns first. So let me explain. By determiners, we mean articles, we just mentioned, demonstratives, possessives, and quantifiers, right? So in English, we have these 4 types. There's a little bit of overlap, but anyway, those are the 4 types we usually talk about. What am I saying here? High frequency countable nouns first. Why countable? Well, countable nouns are much more common. Let's take a look. Of these 100 top nouns in English, the ones in red are uncountable. The ones in red that are bold are always uncountable, without quibbling about things like water, meaning get me a bottle of water. But the ones that are not in bold, like time, life, business, those can be both. So practicing quantifiers with countable nouns first, I strongly recommend, as opposed to getting in, and here's the thing about rules again, with articles for countable as opposed to uncountable and all of that. Let me explain what I mean. So we can take a countable noun like time, right? Did you have a nice time? Now is the time to talk. And of course, a discussion about the difference between indefinite and definite articles is important. But again, once you've done that, lots of practice with indefinite and definite articles with countable nouns, not so much getting into rules. Demonstratives, and notice singular plural comes into play here too. This year, those people where you're doing singular plural without talking about rules, this year, those people. Possessives, right? Her, his, its, our, right? Super important. Again, do it with the nouns from the list, or where there's overlap, where your students have nouns in the textbooks they're using, the materials you're using, right? Of course, you may have units in your books on the things we're talking about. They may be great. Go ahead, use them. But if you're designing your own materials, or you don't like what's happening in your materials and want to create something instead or in addition, this is what I would recommend. Quantifiers, super important with countable and uncountable nouns. Start with the countable nouns, in my opinion, right? Every day, many things, right? Get those plurals. So it's very clear that countable nouns can be plural. So when you get to the uncountable nouns, it's more of an obvious exception. Tip number 4, teach common uncountable nouns with quantifiers. Aha. So my idea is, right, starting with the countable nouns and then moving to uncountable. I'll show you what I mean. You could introduce uncountable nouns. I believe you should give this a try. Introduce them with quantifiers, not talking about, oh, these are never plural. You can't use indefinite articles with them. Instead, go for the quantifiers. Go for the quantifiers. And then, of course, quantifiers with countable nouns, but we already did that a little bit before. Now you go, boom, with uncountable nouns, go right to the quantifiers, and notice on this list, which is just a reference list for you, but also you could use it with students in different ways and activities. right? We have at the top, the idea of much, and then at the bottom, the idea of little, right? So the most to the least, and common uncountable nouns on the right. And the idea, of course, is that any of the quantifiers on the left collocate with those on the right. There's no decision when you're looking at this, is this countable or not? Can I say much? Can I say many? Activities then where they are getting very used to words, the quantifiers like much and little with uncountable nouns. For example, well, the example's coming. Countable nouns then, once they have those uncountable nouns with quantifiers, bringing in the countable nouns with quantifiers. So they've already done things with many, right? So now, since they've seen this before, it makes sense then to compare these with the uncountable nouns. Not the only way to do it, but again, something I've done that's had good results with students. And then the activity you can do is something where they have to collocate them, where they have to find matches, right? You could also use this if you've got higher level students who need to review to get an idea of what they already know, what they remember, right? So they could be putting together things like a great deal of knowledge and then maybe make a mistake and try to make, advices. And then you could then show them charts like this. They could check their work. And of course, there are many other things you could do, games you could play, writing stories, dialogues, etc. Tip number 5, teach the most common and important verb-noun collocations. Well, we've already talked about collocations. I mean, any determiner with a noun is arguably a collocation. Of course, gets more into the idea of chunking and collocation when you look at what we just looked at with quantifiers. And of course, adjective nouns are important. Of course, noun plus noun are important. And we're going to get to those. But I believe the most important one is the verb-noun collocation. And it's amazing still to me to see materials and sometimes teachers teaching verbs without the collocations, or teaching nouns without the verb, right? So just trying to understand, translating the meaning of a noun. I don't know, like gift without learning, give someone a gift or give a gift to someone, right? Getting that grammar at the word level grammar in when you're learning vocabulary, super, super important, of course. And then you don't see as many mistakes, right? So listen to music, for example, in English, enough exposure to listen to music as a collocation, then it becomes natural for the learner's mind to think that's correct as opposed to translating it. So one thing you can do, and this is just basic stuff because I know you guys out there have lots of ideas of ways to make things more interesting, putting it in games, songs, which I like to do, stories, etc. But you can also just start out by having students brainstorm alone or in pairs or groups, right? Which verbs come before time, people, way. Again, I'm choosing these because of the COCA corpus that we talked about at the beginning. And it's great to notice patterns that come, right? So have time, need time, take time. And then what? What about the other side of time, right? So if they have a good sense of what comes before, you could also look at things afterwards. So infinitives take time to do something. I need time to finish. But notice what happens with certain verbs. Spend time studying, right? Waste time scrolling on my phone, right? It's the gerund complement. So that is interesting. It's not interesting, I feel, when you're looking at it as a grammar lesson, but when it comes through a more lexical approach, I think it's super cool. Right? What about people? Talk to people, look for, work with. Ooh, some great verb and preposition combinations when you're talking about a human as an object, right? Good practice down here with infinitives too. Infinitives, I'm thinking about a lot, infinitive complements, because I teach French students and that is a serious issue for them. because in French it would be like figure out a way for doing, right? So a way to do it, discover a way to, right? Also discover a way of doing, right? So again, examples, not rules, with gerund and infinitive complements that follow nouns. I have a song I wanted to share with you. I actually put it in the. I wanted to bring it here, but we're going to share this as a recording. And wow, talk about irony when it goes out on YouTube. Sometimes there are issues with copyright because they're thinking that they're taking my song without my permission, and I can't figure out how to fix that. But anyway, I'll give you an example of it. But it's called "Don't You Know." You can find it on Fluency MC. Think about the noun verb collocations here. It's a little bit different. A knife cuts, wheels turn, a door shuts, fires burn, balls bounce, a dog barks, cats pounce, a car parks, pens write, a pie bakes, teeth bite, a glass breaks. What's going on here? We have, I love this collocation because it's a sentence, really short one, right? The shortest sentences in English, that are common, where you have an intransitive verb, right? So this is also important because in languages, I'm thinking about Japanese, Korean, for example, this can be a real nightmare. So knowing that a noun can go with a verb with no object, and there's no passive structure, right? And notice something else. Singular, plural. I told you we were coming back to this. Singular, plural, and articles through examples, right? So if you want to analyze it, a door, because it's countable, and then shuts, it's singular, so there's the S. But fires, that's a plural noun. Burn, not burns, the S is on the plural, right? But then what? You also have some uncountable nouns. Food spoils, not a food, right? So it continues this song. Check it out if you're interested for verb-noun collocations, or in this case, more noun-verb collocations. Tip number 6. Oh, we're halfway through. Tip number 6, teach the most common and important adjective-noun collocations. It's not that you can't do this first. I mean, obviously, with students, you can raise their awareness and have them looking for collocations, any types of collocations, and you should early, like a beautiful day, a rainy day, for example. I just wanted to emphasize the verb-noun collocations because you really can't get anywhere when you speak without them. Adjective nouns are great, but they are not essential the same way verb noun collocations are. So something similar. Here we go again. Time, people, way, right? A great time, a difficult time, and ooh, here we are again with what's the difference between a great time, a difficult time, and next time, another time. Countable, uncountable. Raising their awareness, showing them, figuring out collocations much, much better, I believe, than some kind of rule approach to this. Okay? Because once they have, and again, you might get them to brainstorm this, or you might just give them examples or a few to have them start thinking about it. Once they have collocations like this before them, they can see them, they're practicing with them, then they can make sentences, build them out, and they'll make mistakes on the sentence level. But it's really hard, right, to help students with the word grammar and then also help them with the sentence grammar. That's what's great about chunking, because once they've got the chunks like these, then it's more of an issue with the sentence grammar, not both at the same time. Tip number 7, teach the most common collective nouns. Now, I've been saying, high frequency, common this whole time, right? Of course, that's important. And just once again, to mention, it's not just what a corpus says is common or your textbook says is common, but knowing what your students need if they're preparing for certain tests, certain careers. If they're younger kids and there's a curriculum ahead of them, you want to get them really strong when they're young to be able to build better as they move through. You're going to be making decisions. You need to be making decisions about which vocabulary you want them to learn. So collective nouns are so so useful. However, if you Google collective nouns, if you look out there, you'll see a fascination with collective nouns that are not very common. Now that comes, I believe, from people whose first language is English, right? So there are these lists, they were not aimed initially at second language learners. They were just, sort of for fun, because there are a lot of collective nouns that go back in history that are either not used anymore or were never really used. The most famous of which are for animals, right? Like a merger of crows. Right, we would usually say a flock of birds, right? So a flock of crows, that's common, but you can get very specific, right, with animals, with collective nouns. Collective nouns, another way to help with singular, plural, and articles. I told you we were going to go back to this idea a lot. So you could get them to brainstorm these, or you could just hand them something like this and have them try to do it, or in a game, in a song, in a story. I'm making this, this is very basic, very simplistic. What I'm doing here is to make sure everybody is with me on the principles that I'm talking about. But once you have fodder like this, you can create cool activities when they have your students make sentences and stories, put them in context. So frequency, again, is key. A bunch of, a pair of, a bottle of, a pile of, a piece of, those are 5 really common ones. There are others, and students have a lot of fun with these and can start looking for them, and it can really, really help, especially with uncountable nouns like food, stuff, right? Information, advice, really cool. Tip number 8, teach common compound nouns focusing on word stress. So I haven't mentioned pronunciation to this point. I want to talk about it here, and also refer a little bit to other constructions and how focusing on pronunciation with nouns can be useful. So compound nouns, let's compare them to adjective plus noun. And that's what's really interesting when you look at word stress. All right. So compound nouns can be one word or 2 words. Not in every case, but in most cases, they begin as 2 words. And then if they're super common or if the words are short, they can fuse together. So I'm not sure if doorknob originally was 2 words, but my guess is it was. What do I know for sure? I remember that, fireman, mailman, policeman, those were 2 words, and now they're not. A police officer, by the way, is a great word for students who are searching both for something male, female, and also to talk about one, because police is one of those crazy words that's always plural. So a police officer. Compound nouns are everywhere. So where I'm sitting, I can see a doorknob, a notebook, a laptop, a light bulb. I don't have earbuds, but I have headphones. What else? Computer mouse, pen cap, bookshelf, bedspread, because I'm in the bedroom here. What else? Lampshade, curtain rod, nightstand, and you can get students to look around the room and find them. They're everywhere. What did you notice about the stress, right? Doorknob, notebook, laptop. It's always on the first part of the word. That is excellent as a pattern for students to notice, and it can really help them when they're listening and when they're speaking. Contrast that stress with adjective nouns. So there's classic examples of this. Maybe as a teacher, you've already learned about them. So for example, a green house is a house that is green, but where do we grow plants? In a greenhouse. So generally speaking, adjective noun collocations, the stress, and I wanted to mention it before when we were talking about adjective nouns, but I didn't, but now's a good time. So adjective noun collocations, like a green house, right? Like a rainy day, usually, right? A rainy day, right? Not a rainy day. But compound nouns stress on, do I have it? Yes, there it is. Stress on the first syllable if it's one word, and then on the first word when it is a two-word compound. And that is a really, really strong pattern. And compound nouns, again, I teach in France, and that's a really important one because French students, they'll talk about the, the leg of the table or the paper of the printer instead of printer paper, table leg. Compound nouns in English, as I said, they are everywhere and either don't exist in the person's first language or not with the same frequency as they do in English. So really, really important to teach compound nouns, and a great opportunity, as I'm saying, to talk about stress in the word. And by the way, misunderstandings due to adjective noun stress being wrong and compound stress being wrong are really, really frequent. So that's also just so important, not just for their listening, but for their speaking. So I remember stories like in New York, where students would talk about going to, Grand Central Station and say Grand Central Station, when really those are adjectives. So it's Grand Central Station, Port Authority. But when you had the noun and they have it right really flat, then it wouldn't work. Like take something like this, where somebody's looking for earbuds, right? Oh, earbuds, traffic light, shaving cream. So practice the stress on those compound nouns, everybody. Tip number 9. Well, we've talked about verb-noun collocations, adjective-noun collocations. Compound nouns are really noun collocations, right? What about noun plus preposition collocations? When you look on the internet and also in textbooks and other course materials, sometimes it's different what you see online and in the books, but at least in my experience, I find everywhere when there is a focus on a word with a preposition collocation, it's verbs and prepositions and adjectives and prepositions more than nouns and prepositions. And noun plus preposition is really, 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 really important. Not that those other ones aren't. So teaching a noun without teaching the preposition that goes with it, either all the time or almost all the time, bad idea, right? It's not about taking apart the language and trying to put it back together again. That's Michael Lewis lexical approach stuff right there. It's about getting them practice, exposure, repeated exposure and practice with the chunks. So here's another example. Really, that's the theme for everything today. So I have some different examples now. These are from the TOEIC, and not just my ideas of language that's on the TOEIC. These are pulled from real ETS TOEIC exams. Please don't ask me how I got them. That's confidential information. But anyway, no. So here we have the word access. So what's a verb noun collocation? Oh, to gain access, have access. Okay, we talked about that. Adjectives with access, maybe not as important. Certainly access to something, right? Access to should be the noun they learn, particularly because there's a verb. It's relatively new, from what I understand, compared to the noun, and that's sometimes what happens, right, when nouns get verbified. But access to our records. But I really want to access these files. Oh, access is when it's a verb is transitive. It doesn't have a preposition. Wow, that's important. Now, if you're saying, yeah, but it's just a little preposition, true. But if students are in situations where they're using English for presentation, for report and email, we know more accurate use of the language is so important. And it's not about learning rules again. Why is it access to? But when it's a verb, it's access without, no. It's about collocations, right? So access to our records, access, let's get access to the building as soon as possible. But he's not allowed to access this room. right? The verb. But anyway, we're talking about the nouns here, access to. Now it's always access to. How about change? Change has other prepositions. You can also change something, right? So change, right, there are a lot of different paths where it can go. Change in, as you see, is very common on TOEIC. So if you look at TOEIC across lots of TOEIC tests, as I do, you can find which words, in this case, nouns plus prepositions, but I'm making a TOEIC dictionary. So I'm also looking at verb-noun collocations, adjective-noun collocations, quantifiers, and everything else. When you look at enough material, whether it's TOEIC in this case or anything else, right? Oh, you've got like a corpus and you can come up with some great stuff for yourself and for students. So someone studying TOEIC, if you see here, there are a lot of examples of a change in something. So it's not just about learning change in, right? It's about using nouns like company leadership, nice compound noun there, right? We have a bunch of compound nouns and they're all over TOEIC, by the way. So practicing those nouns with the nouns. Look, you're doing noun practice with prepositions to link them together. Copy of something, the cost of something. Maybe you notice here, this is almost alphabetical. I just pulled these out of this TOEIC dictionary that one of these days I hope I'll publish. For now, I just use it with my students. There are certain words, here are a few of them that occur with high frequency on the TOEIC exam. We are now at our 10th tip number 10. Teach common noun suffixes. So you see, I'm not talking just about collocations today. If you go back, you'll see pretty much everything I've been talking about is chunking. But hey, also when we talked about verbs the last time, same thing, but I'm a firm believer in a lexical approach to grammar. And when you're looking at parts of speech, that's what I gravitate to. And I hope most of you out there gravitate to, because it's wonderfully effective. Students of all ages, needs, first languages, etc. But it's also important to learn about word forms and then the collocations that go with those word forms. What are the most common suffixes for nouns? You could give students something like this and have them think of examples. You could give them just the suffixes and have them think, well, what does this mean, and have them try to come up with someone who does something or an abstract noun. But I would never do that personally, right? I would put it out there and have them think, okay, ANT, ENT, ER, and OR, oh, people, jobs, identities, right? IST is another one. Yeah, it's kind of belief in something, but often it's just, again, someone who does something. I put person who does something. So that can be really useful. What about the spellings? ANT, ENT, ER, OR, in terms of pronunciation, different or similar? Well, if you're a native speaker like me or an advanced level student who's not a native speaker, maybe you don't hear the difference because those suffixes are reduced and they sound the same. So often we think, right, is it ER or OR? Is it ANT or ENT? I make spelling mistakes all the time, whereas someone who's new at learning English might feel like ant, or yes, when they're stressed, but they're not stressed in words like student, accountant, right, writer, and actor. They sound the same. As always, once you've got the nouns, it's collocation time, sentences, stories, dialogues. Right? Can play some cool games with suffixes. Right, trying to think of how many you can come up with, or quizzes like on Bamboozle. I have a great word form game you can play. Are there more categories than you see here for suffixes for nouns? Absolutely. Why don't I have them here? Because the list is pretty long and certain nouns are not as common. Like I don't have ism on here, not that it's not important, but again, thinking about frequency. And the shun, ship, itty, right? Those are the most common. Not ship as much, I guess. Certainly TION and SION for nouns, and ITY, super, super high frequency. Before we go, take a look at this. I don't miss a chance to put this formula out there and connect it to what we've been talking about. When students practice with collocations, repeating them, putting them in context, or alternatively, doing reading, listenings, and pulling out collocations, learning vocabulary at that level, then they're going to be more accurate with the grammar. Now, not just collocations, but that's what we've been talking about today primarily, right? So if they know access to these files, right, and they can remember it and use it, then what happens? That practice, that builds their accuracy. And when they're accurate, meaning, right, they're not making the mistake with that, doesn't mean they're perfect, but they can, it's more automatized, right? They have it up here to use when they need, they feel more confident. So that's a really, really important point, because it's not saying you have to be perfect to be confident. And that's where it can also get really messed up, when you or students feel like they have to be so accurate and they're intimidated and they're not getting enough practice, so they are not confident. So lots of practice, just like a musical instrument or sport, right? Lots of repetition, but in a meaningful, fun way. They'll be more confident then to use them, whether it's using them when they're writing, using them when they're speaking, for a test, for an essay, whatever it is, they'll be more confident, and that will make them more likely to use them and become more fluent users of the language. Guys, thank you so much. Thank you for being here live, everybody. Thank you for watching at another time and another place. Wishing all of you a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Signing off from Paris, France. Saluting all the ELTs out there, wherever you are. Thanks so much, American TESOL Institute. Thank you for making these webinars possible. See you next time. Peace, respect. Bye-bye, everybody.